Hi, this is T.H. Culhane for Solar Cities, and I'm packing to go to Baghdad, Iraq, and then to Erbil in Iraq, where we're going to be demonstrating some solutions to environmental problems. And one of the exciting ones here is this 100-watt fuel cell. Right. This is actually the wrong packing thing. This is for the H30 fuel cell stack from Horizon. That's this one that's in here. I'll pull that out in a second. This is the 100-watt version. So this little fuel cell, which is very expensive, it costs about $1,600, $1,700, and it's 100 watts of power. And you put hydrogen in here, and there's various apparatus to put the hydrogen in right here. And then you get electricity out, DC 12 volts, at 100 watts. So that would be about 8 amps at 12 volts. And then, of course, you get hot water out. And these are the things that are running automobiles now, fuel cell-powered automobiles, of course, much larger stacks. They are used for generating electric power as an emergency backup in hospitals and other places. But that's what you've been hearing all about, the hydrogen fuel cell. So Horizon makes those. And here is the other one. This is the 30 watt for comparison.
Oh, that's way smaller.
Yeah. So again, the fans, because of the heat that's generated, and then the stack of PEM or proton exchange membranes inside this, and it doesn't have more of these more complex parts.
Right.
It does have appears to be a small inverter here, and then it comes with some capillary tubing for getting the hydrogen in, and that's pretty exciting. Let's see what there's another part that comes with it. It looks like a little motor. Maybe it's a little pump that helps pump the hydrogen in at the right rate. So that's a nice little doodad in there. So yeah, a nice little 30 watt. So that would be 12 volts at about 2 to 3 amps of power. And that is the one that is described in this manual here, the H30 fuel cell stack. So we've got the H100 here, again with its inverter there, or power conditioner. It says here DC 13 volts negative, DC 13 volts positive on that side. And then it says here an on-off switch. This goes to the fuel cell positive, fuel cell negative. And so that's the power regulator. So when you're coming out of the fuel cell, then you're coming out at 13 volts, which then you could use to charge a 12-volt battery. So that's a nice thing. There's a couple of other cool things in here, because you're thinking, well, where do you get the hydrogen to run the fuel cells? Well, they've made this really cool hydrofill unit. And the hydrofill unit has an attachment to plug into your wall. It is an electrolyzer, and this electrolyzer is a very simple thing that you fill with water, and then when you put the water in here, of course it electrolyzes it, and then you plug in to it. You plug in, this is already open. You plug this in, which is a hydro stick, which is probably nickel, I imagine. It doesn't really, it's hard for me to read. We imagine it's probably nickel, and it forms a nickel metal hydride. And so when this is plugged in here, you are charging it with hydrogen, but the hydrogen is not being stored as a compressed gas. It's being stored as a metallic hydrogen bond, like your nickel metal hydride batteries, the NiMH batteries. You can essentially think of this as an NiMH battery that you get in regular store, except you're generating the hydrogen by the electrolysis of water that you put in here to fill this up. And then this cartridge is used in what they call the mini pack handheld fuel cell power supply. And when you plug the cartridge in this way, you can plug in your USB and you can charge your cell phone or run your iPod or iPad and peripheral. So it's a way of carrying around hydrogen as a battery. So think of this just as an extra battery that you're using for your devices, your USB devices, but you're running them off of hydrogen that you produce yourself from water using electrolysis. And that's one of the nice features here. We're bringing out to Baghdad a bunch of them. So there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of these hydro sticks that could be filled. And you can imagine having these filling in your home all day and then having them lined up, and you just put them in your pocket and you're carrying your battery solution. So it's an interesting way of getting the public to start using hydrogen and using hydrogen fuel cells in a safe way. And then the other things that we have in here, in this bag of goodies that's going out, is we have the intelligent fuel cell car, and this is a single watt fuel cell. So here's a 1 watt fuel cell. It shows how simple these are. So what we were looking at in the, let me just go back to this 100 watt fuel cell is basically 100 of these, or rather 100 of the membranes that are inside the center of this, all stacked up together next to each other, whereas the 30 watt fuel cell is 30 of them. And you can see from the size that how this works, that if you had 30 of these membranes stacked up, then you would have a 30 watt. If you stack up 100 of them, you get 100 watts. And if you stack 1,000 of them, you get a kilowatt. But that's the essential technology. It's really just a piece of plastic called naphthion, which was developed by DuPont. It acts as a proton exchange membrane, meaning it lets protons, which is what hydrogen is, a single proton, a single electron. The protons go through the plastic, but the electrons can't get through. And so then the electrons have to go someplace to meet up with their beloved proton on the other side to form hydrogen again, to form that atom. So when it's in its ionic form, the proton goes through and the electron says, I got to get somewhere, so it goes through a circuit and completes the circuit when it reaches the other side, generating water because it's using oxygen in this process. And so that's how you generate electricity. And the more of these you stack, the more protons go through, which means the more electrons have to go around to complete the circuit, and that gives you your higher wattage. But it's a really simple technology that was invented in the mid-1800s. So it's not new, but it's been perfected, and the cost should come down. And then the rest of this is just a car chassis that gets plugged into, and you fill these bottles with, this one collects the hydrogen, it says H2 on it.
I think I'm going to be able to pick it up.
Okay.
Kind of, yeah.
And this one says O2 on it, or it says O for H2O. And this gets filled with water, and you have a syringe to get the water in, and you've got these little tubes. And you put this on the car in here, and you plug it in, and these LED lights go on, and the car drives. So it's a good demonstration to people for how that works. And then they have a battery box here so that you can provide the electricity to electrolyze the water that is in these, and then it begins to collect the gas. So imagine that this is filled with water, and when the electric current passes through the fuel cell, it fills, the water turns into hydrogen and fills that little bell inside there. Similarly, the oxygen fills this as the water electrolyzes. So it's what they call a unitary regenerative fuel cell, meaning that if you put electricity in, and you can use solar power to do it too, put electricity in, it turns into hydrogen and oxygen. Reverse the reaction, and it'll create electricity and turn the hydrogen and oxygen both into electric power and back into water. And so the water never leaves. You just keep using the same water over and over and over again. Charge it to make the hydrogen and oxygen, then release the electricity to run the car, turn it back into water. And there are other models that we've used that have solar panels rather than battery packs. Any source of electricity will do the electrolysis. And that's basically what this thing does. It just basically provides an electric current to electrolyze the water and turn it into hydrogen. A very simple reaction. And there's one other cool thing in this kit, and that is the solar hydrogen starter kit, which is just like the car, but as you can see, you use a solar panel as the source of electricity. There's the holders of the water that also become the holders of the hydrogen and oxygen, and there's the single fuel cell. Just giving people another concept of how to do this, and it even comes with water. Look at that. And a little wind, yeah, so you can show that you can generate, you can make the fan turn when you run the fuel cell, or you could spend time blowing on this, put it in the wind, and then it'll generate electricity, because if you use electricity to turn a motor, you can also turn a motor to generate electricity, and that would then you can demonstrate by doing that you can turn the water into hydrogen and oxygen all through the unitary regenerative fuel cell, which is here. Don't forget to wear safety goggles. So it's fun little toys here, and they show that you can use the High Runner Basic. So they have a car model also. There's a High Runner and the High Speedster, depending on how powerful your fuel cells are. The Speedster has 2 fuel cells. That one's got 1. That one's got 1. So there's a lot you can do. You learn a lot with this. There's the solar panel. And then you can graduate on to the 30 watt and then up to the 100 watt fuel cell, because you've understood the basic principle, and then eventually go for a kilowatt or 2 kilowatt or 5 kilowatt fuel cell that would run your whole house or run your car. But it's getting people to understand it. So even though there's a very expensive, even this was $895 for a 30 watt fuel cell at this point. And this thing is about $600. It definitely isn't for the faint of heart right now that the prices are up, but with economies of scale and the higher demand and greater production, the prices should drop, because they're really simple technologies. There's no reason why the price couldn't be very, very low, other than we don't have big factories producing them with those economies of scale. But the principles are very simple. We've all learned them in high school chemistry, and as I said, they were being done in the mid-1800s. Now NASA uses them on the space shuttle and the space station. And so it's a technology we want to bring to Baghdad and to other places that are having problems with electric infrastructure, and places that are having problems getting clean, renewable energy, and introduce this as one of the suite of solutions that we're offering. Thanks.